Hello everybody, welcome to Noetic. I am CJ Eller, and I'm joined by Jordan Cline.
Yeah.
And we are on the 4th episode of Montaigne's Essays. And we are going to be touching on the 4th chapter, titled, How the Soul Relieves Its Feelings on the Wrong Objects When the Real Are Wanting. And Jordan Cline's going to lead our discussion of this particular essay. So I'm going to let Jordan take it away.
Cool. So this is a short and sweet little essay. So I'm pretty much just going to cut right to the chase of the sort of two main points that Montaigne makes. The first one is the soul should really have an activity. It needs an activity to anchor it. Mm-hmm. And it needs a sort of object or a goal to work towards.
Yeah, I mean, he gives that really great beginning story of the guy whose doctor wanted him to get off of certain fat foods,
like delicious fatty foods, like no more salami, bye bologna,
right?
Yeah, like all
but then
that.
He said,
mm-hmm.
but then the guy said, "Well, if you took that away from me, I wouldn't have something to shake my fist at when I was dying of clogged arteries."
Yeah. So, and that's the sort of type of guy that you might say, or Montaigne might say, would slip into a passion.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this kind of ties in a little bit, or remind me of what we did on Marcus Aurelius about sort of the virtue as an activity.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my mind, what I understood as the sort of activity is something that is you find purposeful, and I guess what I really want to establish in this podcast is the difference between sort of passion and purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Because, there's always that tendency of the vernacular that we have. I'm so passionate about marketing.
Yeah.
I am so passionate about working out.
Follow your passion.
Yeah, follow your passion. Follow your bliss. And I'd like to contend that that's not what Montaigne wants us to do. And I think that in our minds we tend to misconstrue what should be purposeful activity with sort of passionate activity.
Because he even says, he uses the example of, or the analogy of trying to strike something when we feel hurt, and if we miss it, then we feel bad about that because we're just hitting empty air. But if we can have an object to hit in response to a certain emotion, then that's good. So, but with passion and what was the other thing you said?
Purpose.
You still hit something, right?
Yeah.
But what you're trying to say is that it's even if you are hitting something, it's not this. You're not hitting the same thing, or maybe the thought process is not the same.
It's just not that substantive, and he refers to, and it reminded me of Meditations, right, that we covered in our series on Marcus Aurelius, is that these sort of passions are more impressions. So if you kind of think of it, I don't know, I sort of thought of it in terms of almost health food. So, instead of, I don't know, like reaching for like a handful of like healthy almonds with a purpose, if you don't have any sort of direction in your life, you're just gonna like, reach for like a Lunchables instead. No dig at Lunchables, they're delicious. But in terms of sort of nutritional value, the soul would actually rather take an impression or a passion that it willingly knows is false and is not good for it, rather than have absolutely no direction. And that reminded me with our series on Simone de Beauvoir, right, with like the serious man or the passionate man. And if you don't have sort of a purposeful calling or something that you find meaningful in your life, then you can easily get sort of co-opted by your passions.
What are some examples he gives, Montaigne? Did you find anything interesting or any
I think
connections?
I think that he gives more about sort of the passion of grief, sort of like in the later episodes.
Okay.
Or sort of the later episodes. I'm sorry, not the later paragraphs. He gives sort of like little episodes of the passions of grief, but I think in terms of sort of our first sort of objective, right, of the essay, it reminded me of Meditations and Simone de Beauvoir, and to a degree it reminded me a little bit of what we did with the Augustine, of having these inordinate desires, these passions that we have that just sort of run amok when we don't when we leave them unchecked.
Okay.
And sorry. And then the next point I wanted to make was the fact that this essay is very much indicative of the randomness of people and the strangeness and that sort of irrational sort of capacity that we have. So he sort of balances this essay, right, of talking about how you should always have, he implies that reason should govern this sort of more virtuous, this more purposeful self.
But it doesn't happen.
And then he completely gives this is the opposite in all of these examples. Like my favorite was with, I think it was Augustus, right, when he lost his legions in Germany and they just got like wiped out. And he was just like, Varus, give me back my legions. Like, and Montaigne's kind of like, well, this is absurd. Mm-hmm. Like, why are you grieving over this? And in fact, that I forget what number of legion it was, but that legion was pretty much just like taken out of the rotation because it was considered like an unlucky legion number. So it wasn't for some time. That was actually like re-implemented back into the Roman military for some time. Like that's how that's like all the bad juju that was like surrounding it.
And I know another example was he used Xerxes and how he would chain and whip the Hellespont, or that body of water. He would just like whip it, just out of, like you said, just this grief and passion, or at least he would have, that was his outlet. Mm-hmm. And Montaigne says, "Dude, that's a little ridiculous. Why are you doing that? It doesn't help anything." So right. so maybe there's this idea with passion that if we do have an outlet for it, that it can bring about some sort of good.
Yeah, and there's sort of a
or catharsis.
Sort of, yeah, there's some sorry. So there's that sort of channeling, I guess you could say, like that energy. But then at the same time, we also have to acknowledge, there's sometimes where you see, I don't know, like your dog's like wagging its tail, and then all of a sudden it catches its like the view of its own tail, and then just starts like chasing it, and like it kind of like attacks its own tail. There's also that kind of I guess nature in ourselves that we need to sort of acknowledge, that we can have these sort of moments of crazy, frenzied, sort of like reactive behavior.
I think Montaigne says it's more, these actions are more, and I'll quote my edition, more the nature of overweeningness than of stupidity. That's not just, we're just so dumb. It's just that, like you said, and I think when I hear overweening, I think it just means like you're just kind of like going over.
Yeah, it's like basically arrogant or just overconfident.
Yeah.
So maybe that's
another side of it too, is that maybe we think that our passions have more power, that if I just say, give me back my legion, or if I whip the Hellespont, that is my way to get back at the world, and that I will have an outlet.
Right, or I kind of always think of Anchorman with Brick. I don't know what we're yelling about, and that one's everyone's getting really worked up. It's like, I don't know why I'm shouting, but I'm angry. It's one of those sort of sentiments. I have this emotion, but I don't know what I'm doing.
Right. But then
someone will feel my wrath. I don't know who or what's going to be the object of it, but someone will pay.
But at that, Montaigne then says, well, again, it is this overweeningness, but in the end, who's going to hear it? Who's going to hear your cries of pain? And I think he quotes Plutarch and many others who just say, look, nobody's going to hear your wrath. Nobody, who is Fortune going to hear it? Does Fortune have ear? I think he says, I'll quote him, or against, for they are more than foolish, since they add impiety to their folly, who direct their anger against God himself, or against Fortune, as if she had ears to be assailed by our batteries.
Right. So we're just these insignificant ants And we are more absurd when we just refuse to acknowledge our ant-like puniness in the universe.
Yeah.
When we rail against our own insignificance.
Yeah. I think that's what he's getting at, and that it's just something that's a part, again, like you said, the oddity of human existence, or maybe the frail, we keep going back to the frailty of human existence. It's this idea that we have more power than we think we do, or that we think we have more power
than we actually do.
And that by airing our grievances or using passion in some way against this thing that we have been afflicted with or has done some wrong against us, we think that we can get one up on it by that grievance. And how many times do we see that with social media, or just friends, or if you're just getting angry at us?
Yeah, or just even like toddlers, what I mean? Like maybe like some powers that be are looking upon us as if we're like toddlers, like thrashing and having a temper tantrum, and they're trying not to laugh. When you're babysitting and you see like kids like really like worked up because they're like full meltdown mode, really upset, and you're trying so hard not to laugh, but to them it is so serious.
Yes.
It's kind of like that perspective, that outside.
And then the most hilarious part about that is that then we go home and do the same thing in our own adult ways.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Montaigne, I think, ends the essay, or at least I'll take his little thing where he says, "But when our minds are disordered, we can never utter insults enough. We just keep, if we don't have like you said, if we don't have everything in check, like we are just going to keep doing this, and that maybe it is part of human nature. Maybe bitching and complaining is part of who we are, and that there is some sort of, like you said, or maybe like it's implied, there's some sort of catharsis to this.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Shaking of the fist, and that
it might not accomplish anything, but man, do I feel better after a good rant.
That even people like Augustus Caesar, people like Xerxes, even these rulers or these grand figures in time
can be petty
and think that what they're doing is in some way being of some sort of cathartic nature.
Yeah, so I really like how Montaigne sort of balances the sort of rational with the irrational.
Right, because
he acknowledges it. He's not saying, I keep going back to the Stoicism, but he's not saying, oh, just think that stuff away. He's saying, no, like we are prone to hissy fits, but it's really silly when we do have them.
Yeah, I mean, and at the heart of it is realizing that we are prone to them, and that in some ways we
and they're bound to happen.
Yeah, we can't control it as much as Stoicism says that we can be these automatons who will go through life and
like
have things deflected off of us,
like robots of virtue.
Yes, that we are porous beings who also sometimes don't follow the table of instructions that we've been given to live a good life or to be a good person, right?
Yeah.
And that maybe this essay is just another way of telling us that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I had, just sort of a sweet, simple essay. So
and I think that's
just balance the, rational with the irrational, and
just realize that we can be prone to irrationality, and that, do you think that it's okay to be? Or Montaigne would be saying it's okay, this is just something that happens to us, but try to err on the good side? Yeah,
I think he just kind of points to, the absurdity of it, or the silliness of it. And then at that point, I think that it depends if your vanity outweighs
like some of these examples.
Impulsiveness.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. Awesome.
So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So thanks for listening in, and if you like what you hear, check us out on our app, which you can download from Google Play, the App Store. We're on SoundCloud, we're on YouTube, and I think that's pretty much it for all of our channels. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye for now.